All right, we're live.
Having people say bleed, 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 right? Everybody wanted to hear me play bleed.
All right, I think that's enough of the drum cover to
Oh,
show off uh, Father Cordell's insane drumming skills, but that was a drum cover of "Bleed" by Meshuggah. And if anybody in the audience doesn't know "Bleed" by Meshuggah, first of all, it is a very heavy song. Only listening to the drums probably doesn't give you the full picture. And it's if you're not familiar with drums or with Meshuggah or anything like that, you might not realize how insanely difficult what Father Cordell was just doing. But he is incredibly talented. And today I'm joined by Daniel and Anton to talk about liturgy and music. And we thought it would be really funny to start off with Father Cordell covering Meshuggah's Bleed. Anton and Daniel, what's up?
Greetings,
hey.
Kevin. Thanks for having us.
So today's topic is liturgy and music, traditional and modern. So I think we're going to be talking a little bit today about, I guess, first, just the musical traditions that the three of us come from. Because, I'm, I guess, over on team traditional, not team traditional, but, I grew up with traditional liturgy and traditional music. And we could listen to some of that later in today's stream. But Anton and Daniel, you guys both are more familiar probably with more modern music than you're definitely more familiar with the more modern liturgical music than I am. And so I think we're going to talk a little bit today about which one is better, if such a question even makes sense. With that intro kind of out of the way, how are you guys doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, super stoked. Always happy to listen and participate in your channel.
Oh, and this is the first time that we're on together, right, Anton?
Yeah. I've been a big fan listening to all your appearances with Kevin, and we've sometimes been music nerds on Instagram, but we've never had a live chat.
Yeah, and likewise, I'm a big fan of all your appearances, and we kind of became fast friends through the non-Tradicath. Now the Kevin of Kevin of Alexandria. Is that who you are now?
Yeah, Kevin of Alexandria Universe. Yeah, it's better than Marvel.
Well, it is now that we've got the Avengers assembled today. So,
oh wow, the band is back together for the first time.
and Pick and Choose is already saying that he was literally just at his drum kit knocking some of the rust off, and he turned on our stream and he's hearing a Bleed cover.
Awesome, man! A moment of providence.
Providential. It's
a miracle meant to be.
A miracle.
All right.
So there is a Skillebeck's quote about God being a jazz drummer that Daniel found that I'm going to read. Is it cool if I read it?
Yeah,
cool.
For sure.
Okay. So here's the quote. Just as when a drummer is playing, he is extending himself through all his bodilessness into the instruments grouped around him, so that these instruments dynamically participate in the expressiveness of his rhythmic movement, making but one total movement, which, arising from within the drummer, flows through the rhythm of his body, of his beating hands and stamping feet, and produces a varied harmony of percussion. So too the heavenly saving will of Christ, through his glorified body, makes one dynamic unity with the ritual gesture and the sacramental words of the minister, who intends to do what the church does. And that comes from Christ, the Sacrament of the Encounter with God, published in 1963, page 77. And I think that reading that after watching a priest doing a cover of Meshuggah's "Bleed" is, I think, particularly poignant.
Yes,
A
a
Dominican
Dominican,
priest. No, yeah.
just like Skillabix. You know.
Oh, okay. I actually didn't know that he was a Dominican too.
I think terminally online Thomists should consider this cover as their theme song and inject.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, he has some other really, really fun covers.
Yeah.
But you know, so Skillabix prefaces that quote you just read by asking forgiveness for drawing, quote now, for drawing a likeness between the sacred sacramental event and a present day, which Skillabix was writing in 1960. So when he says a present day drummer, jazz drummer, I'm sort of picturing Art Blakey, Elvin Jones, maybe Joe Morello of the Dave Brubeck Quintet. I also picture the post-Vatican II jazz masses in the Netherlands, which was a thing.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah, it's kind of obscure. And then there's a hymn set to the music of Dave Brubeck's popular Take Five that we in our parish still sing at Mass. And sometimes when I hear it, you know, if I'm in a feisty mood, I'll ask the pianist if we're going to get Blue Rondo a la Turk next week. Which, you know, something I found out in researching for our program here is that the Brubeck himself was a convert to the Catholic faith. And supposedly, and I didn't have time to look this up, should have. I'm a big Brubeck fan. I have a little bit of a personal history, very small history with Brubeck when I covered Take Five back in the 80s in my little band, and we had to get permission to do it, and I got a little handwritten, well, we collectively we got a handwritten note from Dave, and just kept saying us, you know, kudos kids, you know, carry on. And so I have this little very slim personal connection with but it's enough for me. I'll take it, you know. But
That's so
I
cool.
only learned recently that Brubeck was a convert at one point, and I guess he wrote a mass, which maybe the, you know, maybe the Take Five thing is from his mass. I don't know for sure, but we still sing the Brubeck piece at our parish. So there, that's how that's how small of a world we're in.
That is a small world. I have a like a small little Take Five story from when I was in AP Music Theory in high school. So we were doing like drills where we would just like listen to a piece and then just have to identify the time signature, like a very normal drill. Um, and I wasn't thinking about the name of the song. And so for those in the audience who might not know, Take Five is in 5/4, like it's, and it's called Take Five because like it, you know, it's very obvious. And I just wasn't thinking about the connection between the time signature and the title of the song. So I went, "Oh, that's cool. You picked Take Five." And my teacher was like, "Kevin, you shouldn't have said that." Like, I'm like, "Oh, sorry. I don't know. I just wasn't thinking about the, you know, the time signature and the title." But that's my little Take Five story.
That's wonderful. So, you know, so I guess I reached out to you, Kevin, a while back. It took us a while for us to make connections, but I reached out to you just because I had this little. I was just going on a little personal rant about different things I was seeing online about the liturgy wars, and I saw some comment about the Coldplay or you know, Coldplay music at mass and all this stuff, and I just had this sort of gut reaction to that. Like, it seemed like it struck me as, and you know, no offense to the person that wrote the Coldplay comment, but wasn't on this channel. But I just, it felt to me like such a normie, you know, uninformed comment about, you know, the contemporary music scene in the Catholic world that it bugged me. You know, I just wanted to vent about that, and I thought it would be great for 3 musicians who I think come from very diverse, you know, not only do we have our own respective liturgical backgrounds, but each of us is you know, a musician to some sort of serious degree. Probably Anton is the chief among us, but you know, in my past life, I did play professionally in a band. That was in the 80s when I did my Brubeck cover, and have quite a history with music. And then, you know, Kevin, you're obviously a, you know, extremely competent guitarist.
Wow.
I don't know what else you do, but I know you can shred. In fact, the first video I discovered of Kevin was him shredding along with Brian Holdsworth,
Brian Holdsworth,
which I always said, you just got to say you're shredding with Holdsworth, you know, and let everybody else figure out that it's Brian, not the more famous Holdsworth of the guitar world. But
so when you hit a certain subscriber count, are you going to give us a live stream guitar concert, Kevin?
You know, that it's actually kind of a fun idea, and I won't lie to you, I have been actually like learning recently how to actually so I have, let me see if I can get it in my camera, but there's this little device right here.
Audio, like an audio interface?
Yeah, it's just an audio interface, and so I can plug my guitar in here, and I've been like, so I've always been a hardcore like I give me an actual amplifier and like actual guitar pedals and stuff like that. And I've been resisting the whole virtual amp movement for a decade at this point or whatever. But recently I've been getting into virtual amps specifically because I think it would be cool to actually be able to make like music content and like play my guitar as part of content. And I don't know how to do it exactly yet, but I'm getting close.
So you're becoming basically a Novus Ordo guitarist now. You've softened the edges.
Oh man, don't let my family hear that. That's even worse than being an apostate.
Oh my. Oh yeah, that would be worse. That'd be worse. It's right up there with clown masses.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Guitars at mass is just as bad as a clown at mass. There's no difference.
Well, tambourines. I think the tambourine is the absolute offense, and that's, you also, some of the older folks I think will also call them tambourine masses.
Is that a real thing that people say, like tambourine mass as like a derogatory term?
Oh, I've heard it.
Oh, I haven't heard that, but I believe you. I just haven't heard
tambourine masses. I think we might have had a tambourine. I got roped into, really against my will. Actually, I should say it was more, I got tricked into playing with our Life Teen band for like 1 month. I lasted 1 month, and it was a really good band. It was a really good band. I mean, they did it very respectfully, and very talented musicians. And the band, the director of the band was a music major at the local college, and very good musicians. And but there were just too many cooks in the kitchen. I was not used to. I've always been the leader of the band, and it was a learning curve for me to just sit there and take, it was a whole learning curve. It didn't work. I only got tricked in. I didn't voluntarily seek, or I didn't seek this out. I got tricked into doing it, more or less, but lasted a month. So that was my experience with liturgical music. Oh, what's this comment from Pick and Choose? Feel your pain. I got roped into playing drums at Life Teen Mass for like a year. A year. He lasted a year. That should be your purgatory on earth. It wasn't my
grounds for canonization right there.
Indeed.
Straight to heaven when you die. You did your purgatory time. You're good.
Yeah. And I would, if I guess if my my personal situation was different. I could see myself. I could see myself doing that, again, if really at the time my life situation wasn't such that it permitted me the time to do it, because it was really a commitment. I mean, you got a whole new raft of songs like every week, and you like spent the whole week learning these tunes. Maybe because I was new, they'd probably once I learned them it would be okay. But I was just like, I'm kind of like when I do something, especially musical, I'm like all in. I'm like, this is life and death, and I'm going to learn these tunes, and so it was just, I was taking it probably way too seriously, and anyway,
I have an honest question, and this is something that like I legitimately don't know the answer to. At Novus Ordo masses, for like if you're playing with like a Life Teen like band or whatever, like, are you playing like different songs at mass every single week? Because for me growing up in the FSSP, the chants did change throughout the year, but generally it didn't change by a ton.
So at any Novus Ordo mass, you get different songs. Now, maybe not the liturgical piece. So we sing. So I don't know. So well, I got a question back at you. So we sing hymns at mass. Okay, we like sing songs. So those songs always change.
Okay.
Now, like the Our Father doesn't change.
Right.
Like the Gloria does not change. All those are always the same. The
mass parts stay consistent, but it's usually the processional hymn, the offertory hymn, the communion hymn or hymns, and then the recessional hymn. That those four are always changing.
Okay. So I wasn't part of our choir, so I can't tell you for sure exactly what changed. But like, obviously, like, we had, the music during, the Gloria is not going to change from mass to mass.
So I've got something fun here that I
one of the worship books.
You're prepared.
Now this is from, I was just digging through some of my grandmother's things. Well, I was looking for a random hymnal, and the closest thing I had was my grandmother's hymnal. Now, my grandmother converted she joined the church after I joined the church. I don't come from a Catholic background. I'm a convert from back in 2005, so but my grandmother had this worship hymnal this thing's from 1975. So when my grandmother joined the church in 2006, her parish was still using the 1975 worship hymnal. And it has this fun little paragraph in the introduction that just shows you the reverberations of Vatican II in 1975. It says, the Roman Catholic Church has its own sacred music tradition, but that tradition does not include a long history of singing in the English language. Unlike their fellow Americans of the same American melting pot culture, Catholic parishes, for the most part, have yet to experience the same vitality of song that echoes from their neighboring Christian churches. Musicians and liturgists have long expressed need for a Roman Catholic hymnal that is theologically sound, embraces the fullness of liturgical practice with all its opinions, and respects the hymnological traditions of those commonly referred to as Protestant hymnals. It is to this need that the editors of Worship II have set out to respond. And I should note that this hymnal contains at least one hymn by Martin Luther. So
scandal.
Oh. So my question, Kevin, was did your FSSP church, did they first of all, did they have a hymnal? Like a book of song, like a song book?
So no.
Okay. Okay, so that answers question 2. There were no like
the congregation was not to sing. The congregation was to be silent during. Also, some trad churches do congregation responses in Latin to the priest. Mine did not. The only people responding to the priest were the 2 altar boys, or the 1 altar boy during a high mass. So during a high mass, only the MC responds, the master of ceremonies, and during a low mass, both of the altar, because there's only 2. There's a bunch of altar boys during a high mass. There's only 2 during the low mass. So both of them respond during the low mass.
So
but that's it.
And a low mass is the one you can't really hear. It's not audible.
Correct. Yeah.
So you had people like praying rosaries and stuff during mass.
Yeah.
This
exactly. Especially daily mass.
That's something I've heard about. I didn't realize that the whole praying the rosary during a mass. That's like contrapuntal prayer right there.
Yeah, it kind of is, right?
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, but during a low mass, you can hear the prayers at the foot of the altar. The priest will say that out loud. But he's saying it at a speaking volume. So if you're sitting in the back of the church, now the church I grew up in wasn't very big, so you could hear the priest, but you're probably not going to hear it well. And he's speaking Latin anyway, so you have no idea what he's saying.
And he's speaking Latin. What was it? What about? Did he give a homily in English?
It depends. So at a Sunday low mass, yes. But during a weekly low mass, no. There's no English at all during a weekday low mass.
Right. So I think Vatican, like Sacrosanctum Concilium, might have mandated that you. I think they said, I was just reading. I just kind of read through it today in anticipation of our show. But I think the way they put it, I should have like taken some notes, but I just wanted to be more familiar with it. But they talked about in Sacrosanctum Concilium about how there ought to be a homily, like this whole optional homily thing was sort of being frowned upon now. Like, no, we want to do a homily, and especially at Sunday. So it may have actually been a mandate by the time you were going to church that they had to do it.
That is quite possible. And I will say that the FSSP generally, for my chapel definitely, and I think the FSSP at large does its very best to comply with all of the stuff that they are required to do. Like if their local bishop tells them you have to do this thing, the FSSP makes it a point to do that thing. That sounds about right. That the sermon in English was kind of and not only was it the sermon, but so the epistle and the gospel would be read in Latin during mass, but then the priest would go and right before the sermon he would read the epistle and the gospel reading in English and then do the sermon. So those were the 3 English things during the mass would be the epistle, the gospel, and then the sermon would all be said in English. But that was it for a low mass. Right. And then on Sundays, none of that happens. It's just Latin all the way.
Now, were your missals interlinear? Like, did they have like English translations?
Yes. So we had red missalettes, which are like very common. But of course, you can't have all of the various readings that occur throughout the year in a red missalette. So that was it was Palm Sunday or something was like the Sunday that they chose for the red missalette. But for all the parts of the mass that don't change, you did have the English and the Latin. But the thing is, literally everybody bought a St. Joseph's Missal or a St. Andrew's Missal. And it was like a sign of your, you were clearly not very pious if you didn't have one. So everybody had one. And there was almost like a war going on between do you have the St. Andrew's or the St. Joseph? Which one is better? But it doesn't matter. Each one of them has the English and the Latin. So you could read along.
Yeah, that's great. And, and I kind of like that. I kind of like the EWTN Mass where they do the Novus Ordo Mass, but then they say a lot of the prayers in like a lot of the liturgical things are done in Latin. I think that's a cool way to do it. I kind of think I would like if we would mix in a little Latin, but not every week, because I do love the theology of all the liturgical prayers. Sometimes if I'm in the right frame of mind, those prayers just blow me away. I mean, the theology in them just hits me. I just get like these massive epiphanies sometimes. And
sorry, didn't mean to do that. I started to pull up an actual recording of the chapel that I attended growing up.
Oh,
In
do
case
it,
you want to.
man.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you though. I just meant to
No, I
like.
do want to.
Mm.
I do want to. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's
No,
get
all
the
right.
taste test.
I think I said.
So this is the actual chapel that like my grandparents helped to found. They were one of the founding families. I'm not gonna like name names, but you can see, I guess there are 5 altar boys in this picture, and I'm related to 2 of them. And the priest here who's saying the mass is the priest who married my wife and I. But I'm gonna hit play, and you can hear the kind of music that I was hearing on whenever I attended a Sunday sung mass. So that's the kind of chant that I was hearing every Sunday that I went to a high mass. Now, I didn't always go to a high mass. Sometimes I'd go to a low mass on a Sunday. But I would serve these pretty often. So I could be either of those 2 altar boys up there, or I could be either the 2 altar boys who are stationed over here, holding the little candles. They're called acolytes. The one holding the thurible with the incense, he's the thurifer, and the MC is the one who actually does all the responses. So I could do any one of those. And so this is what I would hear on a normal Sunday, is that kind of music. So that's the music that I associate with liturgy.
Well, you know what? Just listening to that, I'm thinking that's so beautiful that I'm. See, I see. So part of my perspective is I literally like almost all music, and I would almost say any music that's done well. And so I can be sucked into just about any music if it's being done well, or if it's just a good composition. Even if it's not being done well and it's a good composition, I can get sucked. So I just got like sucked right into that. And the beauty of that church, and that's gorgeous.
Yeah, that's
So
awesome. You're a person
I'm
of
a
very
fan.
broad taste. I like to think that good music is the music that speaks to us, which, I mean, that's really all that needs to be said. I like the idea of having broad tastes, and a mass is well done if it's well done. I know that sounds really vague, but I'm very much simpatico with your perspective, Daniel.
Oh yeah.
And I just want to add too that so I have this whole YouTube channel where I'm often kind of maybe trying to poke holes a little bit in the understanding of things at the way that I grew up. I still have a very deep-seated appreciation for the music of the traditional Latin Mass. I really do. That kind of music transports me very easily into like a meditative space. I think because I was kind of used to meditating. It's like I did it my whole life. But I really do think it's beautiful music. You don't really hear it that much anymore. And I think that's a shame, because I really do think it is beautiful music. So I have nothing bad to say about the music of my chapel. The choir was excellent.
I agree.
Right.
Traditional music is, and that hymn was familiar to me. I don't, that it was sung in Latin, but I grew up with an English version of that exact same hymn. Actually, that little clip you showed is very familiar, because I basically grew up with the exact same thing, but the priest was just facing the congregation. That was pretty much the only difference. And most things were in English. So it was exactly what you described, Daniel. I think I really did grow up in a sort of unicorn Novus Ordo, where a lot of the externalities were very much in a Novus Ordo format. But as I grew older and a new order of priests had taken over, it was the IVE priest, Instituto Verbo Incarnato from Argentina. They took over, and over the last 2 decades, they gradually were proactive about incorporating more Latin elements, both in language, but also in terms of rearranging certain things in the altar. And they were there was a lot of controversy when I was like before high school about, the bishop wanted to knock down the communion rail, but everybody rallied against that. So up to this day, we still have the communion rail. But we grew up with a lot of English.
But they don't use. Right? Do they use it though?
Yep. Yeah, they still use the only thing that's disappeared. Which
you kneel?
Oh yeah, we kneel and tongue. Oh well, yeah. Yeah.
You went to an English traditional Latin mass. You didn't go to a
Yeah.
Novus Ordo. Like the more that I hear you
Mhm.
describe the mass that you went to an English traditional Latin mass.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, an English TLM. I guess that is a fair assessment. Yeah, I mean, only up until recently. I don't know. Maybe it was. I'm a little hazy because I've been in and out of California the last several years. But yeah. So the church that I grew up in was Our Lady of Peace Church in Santa Clara, California. Yeah, up until recently, they were still using communion patens. I don't know if that was a COVID thing that they finally let go of using patens, but for the most part, like up until like the early 2010s, at least, there were communion patens all throughout.
I don't even see it anymore because I'm so used to seeing like an altar this way. But obviously, you can see the communion rail right here.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
yes.
receiving on the hand was not an option at my church. Like if somebody went up and like put their hand out for communion, the priests would probably like say something like "kneel, stick out your tongue," and then give them communion that way. But yeah, so I don't even see communion rails anymore. You know what I mean? I just see right past them because
Yeah.
like I'm so used to seeing them.
I think that
Oh.
was one element that was a bit more Vatican II. Receiving with the hand was permitted, but one thing that was funny, there was this older priest, an older Irish American priest, and did you guys have the thing where priests would be hearing communion during mass, and then they would just walk up to the altar to help with distributing communion?
Wait, confession.
Oh, sorry.
Hearing
They would be
hearing
I
confessions?
misspoke. Yeah, they would be hearing confessions during the mass, and then when it's time for
I've
communion,
never seen that.
a number of
No,
them
I've
would
never
just
seen
No?
that.
they would leave the confessional to join for the distribution of Holy Communion, and then they would resume hearing confessions afterwards.
Oh, so I don't think you
Now,
can see
hold
my
on.
mouse, right? Well, so on the left-hand side of the screen,
Mhm.
you see somebody who's dressed in a cassock and a surplice. So the black cassock and then the white surplice on top of it, and he looks like one of the altar boys. And he's all the way on the left.
Mhm.
But that's actually a priest, and he would be hearing confessions, and then maybe 10 or 15 minutes before communion, he would leave the confessional. He'd walk onto the altar and then just go hang out there on the way that we're facing, the left side of the altar. He just hangs out over there until communion, and then he helps distribute communion. So that's Anton. Yeah, what you
Wait.
said is exactly
Yeah,
how we do it.
okay.
Wait. Can you
Yeah.
give him like the signal if you need to do a quick confession?
If he leaves, then sorry, you're better luck next time.
You're done. So, and does it count for? Does it satisfy the Sunday obligation if you are confessing during Mass?
Yeah, it does, and
It's all good.
yeah, which is like I found this was
I'm
kind
kind
of
of digging
weird.
that.
Right.
Oh man.
Sunday
I'd definitely
mass,
be hitting. I'd definitely go to confession more often.
right? And you say your daily rosary during mass too, so it's like you just like you get it all done at the same time. But that was
Grace
normal for
maxing,
me
dude. You're
growing
grace
up.
maxing.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're
There was this
really
one
grace maxing.
one priest, also Irish American. His name is Father Raymond Devlin, and he was renowned for just in and out confessions. Like, in California we have In and Out Burger, and he was In and Out confessions because he would speak so fast that you could barely make out the words to absolution. And your penance, no matter you could have committed murder, your penance is always one Hail Mary. You could be in and out of there in like 45 seconds. And then you might say something that's like, a little bit more in the grave matter side of things, and he would just be like, don't do that, or turn it off, or don't repeat it.
Just don't.
And then
do
that's it. And then he would just like mumble through the absolution. You're in and out, and he would have like one of those clicker counters, and he liked to keep track of how many confessions he would get through in a Sunday. and then as he got older, and then he wanted to stay in confession, and then he would, he didn't want to leave for lunch, so he was buddies with my dad, so he would just have my dad like pick him up a fast food burger, drop it off in the confessional, and he would just keep rolling.
That is the strangest
That's
thing I've
wild.
ever heard.
Yeah.
That's pretty.
But yeah, the reason
wild.
why I brought you guys in this this confession tangent was like we did permit receiving communion by hand, but there was this older Irish priest, different Irish American priest. But if he saw anyone, because they would walk up during the Our Father, and if anyone was in that like holding your hands out position, he would slap them down and be like, no, we don't do that here.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Yeah, no, it's all hands folded. That's the only way we're saying the Our Father. We're not a bunch of Protestants here.
Wow.
Man.
Wow. Wow.
If you don't mind, I might bring it back to music instead of confession.
Sure.
Did you want to add something, Daniel, before we jumped back?
No,
to
I was going to say I was just about to segue do the same segue there, but I was going to ask. So So Anton,
Mhm.
I believe you actually do music, liturgical music.
Yeah, I've been in and out of it the last several years. Although the last several months, I've been helping the local choir here in Canada with just choir workshops and stuff. And actually, yesterday was funny. I slept in and I arrived 30 seconds before mass started, and then I got tapped in the shoulder because they needed to fill in pianist. So that was funny. But yeah, I am involved in kind of informally. I'm not hired at the moment, but yeah, I work with liturgical music.
Oh, beauty. So you're the most qualified among us here on this subject.
I've
An
successfully created
actual
that illusion.
an actual liturgical musician.
Mhm.
Yes, that's wonderful. So what kind of stuff are you playing currently at Mass?
Really just pretty standard Novus Ordo stuff. It's an electric keyboard, your standard hymnal stuff. I haven't heard On Eagle's Wings or played On Eagle's Wings in a long time. I know that one gets a lot of flack, but stuff like Christ Be Our Light or Sing of the Lord's Goodness, that kind of stuff. All the rowdy party music that kind
Ye-
of gets dunked on.
Yeah. Well,
Mhm.
Christ be our. I was going to comment on Christ be our light because we sang that recently. I mean, it's common. We sing
Mhm.
it all the time, but in the lead up to our show today,
Mhm.
I've just been a little more tuned in to some of the stuff we've been singing,
Mhm.
and we did that. And I'm kind of like when I'm in the right mind frame, a good hymn will just hit me in a
Mhm.
real deep way. And that one hit me, and I went and looked it up. It was written by a woman. I think she might be Irish. She's definitely from the UK, but Bernadette Farrell wrote that hymn, and I looked up. She's got albums.
Mhm.
She makes albums. So more I think 80s 90s was her heyday. Very much John Paul II era hymn, and her stuff is that from that
Mhm.
time. But she made a lot of times I'll hear a hymn at mass like Jan Michael Jonkus,
Mhm.
John Foley, certainly Marty Hagen.
Yeah, Marty Hagen or
He's
is
like
it Dan Schutt or
Daniel
Shoot?
Shoot, Daniel
Shoot,
Shoot,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, all
But I'll
familiar
hear
names.
something. Yeah, oh, those are
Mhm.
the notorious offenders. But sometimes I'll hear one of their tunes, and I'll be like, I'll leave mass, and I need to look that. I just want to keep the spirit going, and I want to look up, find it on my YouTube Music and listen to it again,
Mhm.
or find another version and listen. And I don't always find really quality versions,
Mhm.
like what I would say have real production integrity to them, of the Marty Hogan shoot, the Jonkas, the John Foley. They're always a little bit. They always let me just say they always let me down a little bit. But this Bernadette Farrell, she had some album, and she was instrumental in making these albums.
Mhm.
More as like an arranger and coordinator, but she assembled a real quality cast of characters. There was one in particular. I should have noted what the album title was, but I put this album on, and I after mass a few weeks ago, and I just listened to this whole album, and it was like quality music. So, one of the things I wanted to ask you guys was like, I think religious music in general gets kind of a bad rap. There's sort of a stigma to Christian or, you know, religious music in general. I think people kind of hold it at arm's length. I
So
don't know what.
yeah. Mhm.
Do you want to go first, Anton?
Sure. What did you have what was it? Just did you have more of a question there? I didn't want to cut you off, Daniel,
No,
but
I was wondering what what your thoughts
Mhm.
were on that, because I kind of think that's a little so. What my personal experience is, there is some sacred music that I find that I really love, just on its just like on its own merit,
Mhm.
you know, and so I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a shame that there's this, and I feel like it's an undeserved stigma that sacred music gets. And it's probably just the general bad experience that you have as a teenager being dragged off to church. And I think there's this association with it. And there's also the association it has with the more fundamentalist culture that I think it sadly evokes, but it doesn't have to. But I wanted to get I wanted to get like see what your feelings were in kind of your gut reactions to uh sacred music, religious music, and yeah, so that we get this comment about a lot of it is cheesy. I agree. I totally agree. Bubblegum or country western pop. Well, now let's not get too down on country western here,
Yeah,
or
I was,
even
yeah,
pop.
I was gonna say that I understand Michael's comment in the sense that, well, let's knock out like the easiest target out of the way, like Protestant Christian rock. There's a sense of it's trying to be cool, but it knows it's not cool, but it's still trying anyway. And I don't mean that in an insulting way, but I just mean that that's the general impression it leaves many people, that it's trying to be the cool kid on the block, but I don't know. I guess
There's
no.
absolutely that, but sometimes when I feel like sometimes if it's done correctly, it can almost achieve a certain countercultural status. So I'm thinking of there was a band when I was into, so I went through a CCM phase. So I went, so I had a big CCM phase when I was before I was Catholic,
Mhm.
and one of the big bands back then was a group called DC Talk, and they had this song called Jesus Freak that I always felt like that song had like real integrity to it. It evoked that countercultural vibe for me. And they would also cover like they covered a U2 song that U2 did this version of Psalm 40. It was like actually them singing
Huh.
Psalm 40. And back in the day, way back in the 80s, I'm an old guy. I go back, and way back in the 80s, there was always the question that was floating around as to whether U2 was a Christian band. That's the conversation
Really?
we had. Oh, absolutely.
You
Absolutely.
too?
You know, oh, absolutely. Well, they like they said that do songs that had lots of religious imagery in them, and specifically the one that DC Talk covered, Psalm 40, um, was literally a psalm, and there were some other songs they did that had religious imagery, and Bono himself was sort of a professed Christian, sort of a hippie Christian. Um, and there's a great photo. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. It was kind of when I was coming to the church back in '04. It was floating around. It was kind of popular, but it was Bono wearing his. I think Bono was wearing his rosary. He'd wear like he'd do the cool like wear the necklace rosary that
Right.
people in Europe can still get away with. They frown on it in America, but in Europe it's like
Yeah.
kind of like, yeah, we wear necklace rose. And so Bono was wearing his rosary necklace. It's not Catholic, but like the cool thing to do. It's kind of like the like what like when you see Russell Brand wearing a rosary necklace now,
Mhm.
But Bono was wearing his rosary necklace, and he was meeting John Paul too. And so the fun thing was Bono took off his iconic shades, and JP2 put them on. So there's this classic iconic photo of
Mhm.
Bono. I'm pretty sure he's wearing his rosary necklace. John Paul II with the Bono shades on. But yeah, so there was like a conversation on, are these guys a Christian band?
Mhm.
But you got to realize back in the 80s, we didn't really quite the whole CCM industry hadn't become a thing quite yet. Oh, what's the DC Talk comment?
I like this.
Yeah.
People say I'm strange, and then strange, I think, kind of rhymes with manger. So
Yeah,
people
does
say
it?
I'm strange. Does
People
it make
say
me?
I'm strange. Does it make me a stranger that my best friend was born in a manger? And then the breakdown.
It's one
There
of
was a
those
man
things
from the
that, like,
city with a big back. Yeah.
it's like subjectively, as the kids say these days, subjectively, I feel that it's a little cringe. But at the same time, I just have such respect that music is such a subjective thing, and if it somehow elevates someone's religious experience, I'm not gonna dunk on them for that.
Um, Speaking about elevating religious experiences, so Michael asked a question earlier. Oh, and maybe I'll add. I want to try to answer Daniel's question too, real quick.
Sure.
But then I want to pull up a question from Michael, because Anton's point about hey, whatever elevates your religious experience works for you, great. That kind of relates to a question that Michael asked earlier. But so Daniel, your question was like, do you think that like kind of Christian music is like unfairly maligned? And you know what's funny is that like the music that I associate with liturgy really isn't unfairly maligned. People either don't know about it, or if they do know about it, they tend to like it. Like I don't know if I've ever met somebody who goes, "Oh my gosh, I hate Gregorian chant. I hate polyphony." Like nobody really says that, because you're either unfamiliar with it or you like it. I mean, at least that's kind of my experience. Do you
Yeah,
disagree?
and so, well, no, and so interestingly, so before I entered the church, and before Catholicism was even on my radar. I mean, the whole Catholic experience was not even on my radar. The Catholic Church was just the beast of Revelation,
That's right.
or the great whore of Babylon,
Right,
from my fundamentalist background, and I knew nothing about the Catholic Church. But who were the Benedictine? I think they were the Benedictine monks that put out that it was like a smash hit that year. They put out that Gregorian chant album.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Remember when that thing came out, probably in the
Mhm.
early 2000s? And I bought it just for the music.
My
And
family
I
did,
remember,
for obvious
yeah,
reasons.
I was playing it in the off. I used to play it in my office. I mean, this is way back before we had streaming, and I had a cassette player in there, and I just play or see CDs, cassettes and CDs. And
Right.
I remember I put that on, and to me, it was just classical music. That's all I associated with it. I said, "This is just another classical album." And my coworker, who was Catholic, was like, "What, are we in mass now, or what's going on here?" And I said, "It's the newest thing. It's like the newest thing. I love it. I dig it." You know.
That is
Um,
funny.
but there's a
It
lot of classical music like that
Yeah,
has sacred. So that doesn't get that doesn't get quite the bad rap that the pop music gets. But um, I do think there's some contemporary music that gets a little bit of an unfair
I agree.
an unfair rap that it could be totally um, you could just listen to this record and dig it. And so like here another example of this. I'm trying to think of kind of crossover modern Christian music. None of this has anything to do with liturgy, but again, back to the DC Talk thing. They're one of their singers. They were three singers, but one of their singers, Kevin Max, put out this really great album, and it's almost like a rock album. It's like a Christian album that doesn't say Jesus, which was a big thing. This was a big controversy in the CCM community before I came into the church. Was there were these bands like Jars of Clay or DC Talk, and they got criticized because they weren't like overtly like Jesus-y praise music. They were just like more like almost trying to do like what U2 had done, where you don't know if we're an overtly Christian band, but you can figure it out. Except that DC Talk, for example, they presented themselves as a Christian band, but then they tried to like I think they almost tried to go, like go backwards and capture that U2 kind of thing. But Kevin Max made this great album called Stereotype B, and Adrian Belew produced it, who also produced for Nine Inch Nails, and he's a member of King Crimson. He's the guy. Well, also he's the guy heading up this current this fabulous beat tour that just got underway with the recreation of the '80s King Crimson band. But Adrian produced this record for Kevin Max, and then the bassist from King Crimson, Tony Levin, played on the album. So,
can I play a little bit of DC Talk, because I don't know if I know this band, and I want to know if I know them.
What song are you playing?
So I pulled up Jesus Freak, and I actually
play it. Yeah, play Jesus Freak.
I'm actually not sure that I shared it the right way to actually get the audio. So let me share it correctly. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna play because I don't know if I know this.
Oh, it's the video.
At all, or is it?
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah.
Deep-seated in the American citizen is pride in this community.
I don't know this. I don't think I've heard this before.
Yeah, I don't know that I do either.
With respect for the rights of others.
I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. I mean, this sounds like it's like post grunge kind of like.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I guess given how I grew up, even though this is very avant-garde stuff, I just feel like it's just the language of a time and an era. And the same way Gregorian chant was born in a specific context, so is this. And it's just, I don't happen to speak that language intuitively, but it's not objectively bad.
I liked that. I thought that sounded cool.
Yeah.
No, those guys had, no, what I'm saying is when you listen to this band, I liked them as a band. I just thought they had integrity as a band. They were very good singers. And there's a guy, you I don't know, you guys, I'm so old, but I know Toby, they were three singers, and Toby Mac, I think he had some popular crossover, a moment. Maybe I'm just way too old. That was before all your times, but he was doing things up into the 2000s. And then their other singer, Michael Tate, they all kind of went off and did solo careers, and then Michael Tate ended up joining up with the Newsboys, another big CCM band back from the day. But no, I always thought DC Talk had some real integrity in the way they always tried to present themselves as, being about the music and being a little bit radical for the cause. It's funny because Kevin Max got so radical, he sort of got into sort of a very modern Christian, like a postmodern Christian spirituality, which sort of embraced a Buddhist ethic, maybe. Just a very, very, extremely ecumenical. And he got so outside the pale that I remember when our local Christian bookstore stopped carrying his stuff because he was just not even like, this guy's getting way outside the box here. And but it was just funny because I said, I remember when you couldn't, they stopped carrying Kevin Max music, and I don't even know what his current status is. Amy Grant, yeah, she's OG.
Did she go to Satan? Did Amy Grant?
Oh boy,
shots fired.
She just came. No, Amy just came up on my. She just came into my Instagram feed. I think she's touring.
Oh, is she?
She's all good. I mean, she had some bumps in her life. I mean, she was married. Well, of course we all. That's the point. And she was married to another. I forget who the other contemporary worship person was, and there was like a scandalous divorce, and then she actually remarried Vince Gill, who's the guy that's fronting the Eagles now, or the guy that stepped in to replace Glenn Fry.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and so that was a little bit of a, you know, for the super traditional people, the overly, you know, moralistic type folks, that was bad news when. But no, I actually like I've got some Amy Grant albums. She's a good singer. I listened to Amy back in the day.
Do you mind if I pull up this question from Michael that he left a little bit ago?
Oh yes, please.
So he had a question for the panel. Have any of you experienced a rave type techno concert? When I first experienced this, I was like, wow, this is worship, only not religious and more free. And so what I will say is that I haven't been to like a real rave. If by like a real rave, you're referring to like what are those concerts out in the desert called?
Burning Man?
Yeah, like I've never been to Burning Man. I've never done
Coachella or something like that.
Coachella. I've never done any of those. But I mean, I have been to a lot of concerts. Now, the concerts that I go to tend to be more like, you know, rock and stuff like that. But let me tell you that the most religious experience that I ever had was at a Steve Vai concert. It was just 2.5 hours of Steve Vai. He's just an instrumental guitarist, no singing at all. And it's rock instrumental guitar. So it's just 2.5 hours of him shredding your face off. And he plays so loud. And my wife got me front row tickets. It was awesome. And
Best wife ever.
Yes, 100%. No, she got me meet and greet tickets. So I got to meet Steve Vai before the concert and then front row ticket. Yeah, it was super cool. But that was like the most religious experience that I think I ever had. Honestly, like this is somebody who went to the traditional Latin mass 6 days a week growing up, and the most religious experience I ever had was at a Steve Vai concert. So I think I know what Michael is talking about, even though for me it was instrumental rock and not techno. But I think I'm picking up what Michael's putting down. What about you guys?
You go first, Daniel, and then I'll answer, and then I want to tie it into Saint Augustine. I'll describe that later.
Okay. Well, let me do mine, and then you can do the tie-in. But I was just going to agree with Kevin. I mean, many secular concerts I go to, I get caught up in just the joy, and I mean there's a spirituality to music, and I think
that's the right word.
If it's wholesome, I don't feel that there's a real, I mean, like, I don't think I'm having some kind of a Pachamama event. I think if it's wholesome, you know, like all all good things, you know, come down from the Father of Lights, right? So, and Steve Vai, he sort of went through a little spiritual journne.
He's still going through some spiritual journey,
right? But he talks. I've seen his, one of his, one of that one documentary out there where they talk about that. I guess it was kind of a spiritual bookstore that he got some materials from and got really deep into that. And I think he was raised Catholic, and then just went into a more spiritual direction. And I've got tickets. I'm going to see Steve play with the Beat Band in about 1 month.
I'm very jealous. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. The tickets went fast.
I bet.
But yeah, like lots of music. But as for the rave, most ravey thing I ever went to. Sorry if that came through. Got a little phone call there. But the closest thing to a rave that maybe I went to was a Skinny Puppy concert. They're like, if you think, I don't know if you guys know Skinny Puppy, but they are like, maybe you can pull up some Skinny Puppy. But they're like, what was the old band Ministry? They're kind of in that vein, kind of the pre-Nine Inch Nails, kind of pre-Nine Inch Nails. What was going on that led up to, the Nine Inch Nails type thing. But and I didn't go really of my own volition to this. This is something my cousin was into, and I went along. But that was a wild event.
This is very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Precursor to Nine Inch Nails, almost.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that vocal technique is it's very aggressive in a way, but also creepy.
Yeah,
but
they are a little
it's a certain mood. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff I imagine Father Ripperger is hearing when he's doing his exorcism.
Oh, absolutely. Oh yeah, and these guys are extremely edgy, very political, very activist, very. I think the one guy is a vegetarian, vegan, but very anti, vivisection, and lots of social causes. So some of their songs have lots of like gruesome imagery of like the slaughter of animals, and then they got the whole political bent to them. But not my band. But I when the rave question came up, I'm trying to think what's the raviest thing I was ever at, and probably the Skinny Pie. It's a very ravey kind of show and audience. I wasn't brave enough to go down to the mosh pit, so wasn't that brave, but I observed it from a distance. One of the loudest shows I have been to as well. And then I saw some, I've been to some death metal concerts again, accompanying my cousin.
Your cousin sounds like fun.
Yeah, but I've also taken him to some King Crimson concerts, so we cross pollinate.
Yeah.
But no, almost all in any really good concert I go to, I get a very spiritual experience, and especially like in particular like the many Yes concerts I've gone to, like especially in the early days, not the early days of Yes because I'm not that old, but in the in the late 80s when I would be going to the Yes concerts, which was relatively early. Like when John Anderson would sing "And You and I." I mean, I think everyone was having a spiritual experience, and so definitely you can have a spiritual experience. And I think if you're in the right mindset, you can give the glory to God in that circumstance. So, well, let me shut up, and I hope you didn't lose your thought.
No, not at all. I think the fact that you kept returning to, what's that word, like
spiritual
joy, spiritual experience. Yeah, the word that I was going to use, the two words that came to mind when that question came up were ecstasy and catharsis. I think those are two things that I associate. I've only been to one like EDM thing. It was like an outdoor thing in Mountain View, California, and that was the first and only time, just because it was really overstimulating, but at the same time, I no regrets. It was such a nice compliment to like all the classical music that I work with. So I have such an appreciation for the catharsis of that kind of scene. And yeah, there is a spiritual ecstatic thing when you sort of surrender yourself to that sort of group experience, especially if, I mean, I'm not really one to do substances, but I hear that heightens the experience. I feel like I might have brought this up in like one of our text chats, Kevin, but like when I took a musicology course a few years ago, there was, I need to find that source, but there's an overlap in the parts that fire in the brain when you're listening to music and then when you're in a Pentecostal congregation speaking in tongues. And so there is an overlap between spiritual experience and musical experience. It triggers similar parts in the brain. So I think Daniel, you're definitely on to something, drawing those parallels. And yeah, it reminds me of something. I'm just going to read off a couple quotes from St. Augustine and how I think it'll tie into sort of the larger conversation about liturgical music. The first one, actually, I don't even really need to read off. It's just the cliche that St. Augustine said that he who sings prays twice, I think. And that's the that's such a beautiful thing that he held music in such regard that it is something that can augment one's spiritual connection and spiritual experience. Okay, we have a speaking in tongues experience guy here.
Well,
yeah.
I dabbled in tongues.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of our care, and I learned to speak in tongues after I became Catholic, because we had a Life in the Spirit group at our parish, and it was kind of funny. I have very warm feelings for this group and also mixed feelings, because my only criticism of the group, if you could be critical, is they kind of forced the speaking in tongues. Like they overly, I would say, and I don't mean forced, but they definitely, they had they would teach you to speak in tongues. So not like you just, like, I think in true like hardcore Pentecostal, you just get so into it, you just start speaking in tongues. Where the Catholics, they kind of well, if you practice, you can learn to do it. And now there is something to it, because I did learn a version of what I did to join in on their tongue speaking thing, which for me was more like for me it was, I looked at it as a meditation device. It was a way of just, you do this little babble thing. You just
kind of like how the Buddhists say Om, but maybe speaking in tongues
a little bit,
is more
and
elaborate.
there are, and I
like
did
that analogy.
and I have read that there are other religious traditions that do a similar type thing, but there's just this babbling you start doing. You just find your zone, your little tick phrases you start saying.
It always sounds like boom shaka laka laka to me every time.
Yeah. Well, although I will say, when I was doing in our little group, everyone had this really bizarre, their own bizarre technique. There was this one guy that kind of burbled like a fish. I was like, and everybody had their own little personal language. So it always felt a little, so I sort of justified it by saying, okay, this is everybody's, meditation language. And it kind of frees the mind a little bit to just do pure meditation. But I will say, I still find myself, when I'm very moved at Mass, like when the Mass is going on and I'm just really moved, I will just kind of automatically start doing that thing under my breath, because it's like your mind is praying and you don't have to think about concrete words and sometimes praying is difficult because you're just trying to think of all these tacky things that you're saying, like, oh God, bless me and bless and heal. You're thinking of all these things to say, which really, it's, you already feel intuitively what you really most deeply need to pray for. Like that thing that you really are deeply praying for, you don't have to actually put it into words.
That's a very deep point, for sure. I think that there is this tension between being bound by the script and the choreography, which may or may not align with what's going on at a deeper level, subjectively and spiritually. And I think that that's a really important point, Daniel.
Oh yeah. But so part of my whole theme here is this non-judgmental, even sometimes some cheesy things can be profitable or valid. But did you read your second Augustine quote?
No, not yet.
That was my fault. I'm sorry. That was my fault.
It's okay. This is a jazz concert. We're trading solos. It's all good.
I will get to that.
Yeah, I will get to the St. Augustine quote, because I think it'll be a fun quote to to sort of dig into, but I think it also points towards some of the conflicts happening with the liturgical music specifically.
Wow.
I will contextualize this quote by saying, in preparation for this stream, I was looking up, just refreshing my memory on like early church music and just the sort of the beginnings of chant and polyphony and stuff. And the person sort of narrating that video made a really interesting point that the church has always had a bit of a tense and suspicious relationship with music. And I think that'll be highlighted by Augustine's quote, that there was always this sense of like, we want you to create music, but don't get too crazy with it. Like it serves a specific
Right.
function, but
Right.
you know, to draw a rather crude and clumsy but important analogies, in a way, there's a little bit of a spirit that music is sometimes treated like sex, in the sense that there's such a suspicion of sensual pleasure, and I think music, there is something in music that's analogous to sex, that it taps into something primal and sensual and deeply personal. And I think that there is a certain kind of skepticism. One thing that I always hear, I've always heard growing up, and even now to an extent, that a criticism of Novus Ordo music is it's so much more about feeling good and feeling good about your relationship with God and all about the community, whereas old school like Gregorian chant is much more about creating this transcendent experience, and it's much more about the glory of God and this tension of the different kind of contexts you're trying to create with the music that you're selecting. But the funny thing, the irony is that all you're doing is changing the feeling. In both cases, the music is still producing a specific feeling. You're just saying you prefer one feeling over the other. But yeah, the principal conflict does seem to be about feeling and pleasure in context.
Yeah.
Anyway, going to Saint Augustine, his quote was, his little excerpt from the Confessions is, but when I remember the tears that I shed on hearing the songs of the church in the early days, soon after I had recovered my faith, and when I realized that nowadays it is not the singing that moves me, but the meaning of the words when they are sung in a clear voice to the most appropriate tune, I again acknowledge the great value of this practice. So I waver between the danger that lies in gratifying the senses and the benefits which, as I know from experience, can accrue from singing. Without committing myself to an irrevocable opinion, I'm inclined to approve of the custom of singing in church, in order that by indulging the ears, weaker spirits may be inspired with feelings of devotion. Yet when I find the singing itself more moving than the truth which it conveys, I confess that this is a grievous sin, and at those times I would prefer not to hear the singer. So again, there's this kind of Augustinian scrupulosity surrounding music,
I was
which
thinking that is so scrupulous.
very much like parallels his scrupulosity about, you know, sensuality and sexuality.
So,
Which, given his party boy lifestyle, I get it. Like, he had quite the journey. I don't want to judge him too harshly, but just that
right.
relationship with music of like, oh, I can't feel too good about this. It's only about the text. If it enhances the text, if it serves the message. And I think that's one of the biggest tensions in liturgical music is this sense of like, you know, its theological soundness, and we can't enjoy it too much. It has to serve this, but at the same time, I kind of feel like you can't. I mean, we're human beings. Emotions, feelings, sensuality are part of the way that we kind of experience reality. We make sense of it, and I think a lot of the tension between, you know, there are certain tensions that are absolutely matters of taste, but then there is a bit of that scrupulosity. If I can't be enjoying it too much, oh, on Eagle's Wings, it's making me feel goosebumps. Then I'm enjoying the music too much. It's distracting me from the sacrament, you know. And I think there is this weird tension between the sensuality and the expressive qualities of music, and then the sort of theological script that we have to adhere to strictly.
Right. Well, I came equipped with a Balthazar, a Hansers von Balthazar quote that is going to counterbalance the scrupulosity of Augustine. And I think some people might say old Hans Urs is in grave territory here. So this is from Hans Urs von Balthasar's last interview. It's in German, so I had to transcribe this from the subtitles. But this is beautiful. So Hans was talking about his love of music, and the interviewer asks him. He says, "So, you know, what about it fascinated you?" And he says, So he's speaking of his time in Vienna. So this was shortly after Hans moved to Vienna, right after the end of the First World War. And so he's talking about the music scene, and he says, this is Hans Urs now, it says, we had orgies of music, concerts, orchestral masses, operas, all sorts of things. On a Sunday in Vienna, I could listen to music from morning until evening. The interviewer asked, did you make music yourself? And Hans, in Vienna, I had a piano. I had a very good friend then, a very important man, Rudolf Allers. He was a physician. He was a psychologist. He headed the Psychological Institute. He was a philosopher. Finally, he was a Christian theologian. He was a convert from Judaism, translated Thomas Aquinas, translated Anselm. He welcomed me to his home, and we had a wonderful time there. And every evening, we played a Mahler symphony four-handed. That was our form of recreation. So,
wow.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah. Recreation.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that's like Anton's level recreation, having friends
No, man,
over.
Mahler symphonies are massive, and I feel like that's stressful sight reading, but it could also be really fun with the right.
Yeah, but a Mahler, and every evening we played a Mahler symphony four-handed at the piano for recreation. This is a lost. But something about another thing I was going to mention about just the music in general is the music that gets kicked around these days, our modern pop music. We forget that back in the the 30s and 40s, even up through the 50s, I think it was, that classical music was sort of, I guess it wasn't pop music, but it was the music that people listened to. Like my grandmother's generation, it was common that was something you did. You went out to hear the orchestra. And even back when I was, in high school and in my early college days, when I would go see our local symphony orchestra, a lot of those folks from that generation were still coming out to hear them. It was the older generation coming to hear it, and I always laughed because they would set out a box or a basket of cough drops in the lobby. And
so they wouldn't cough in between, during the performance.
The classical cough.
Mm-hmm.
And
it always happens during the most silent, expressive moments.
Yes. Nowadays it's the cell phone. Nowadays the cell phone's the culprit, but it used to be the famous cough during the quiet part. But the cough drops were set out, and I always swear that I know there were old people that the elderly folks, they seemed to come just to scarf up the cough drops, because this at the end that basket was empty. But God rest all their souls. That was years ago. but I guess that Hans Urs von Balthasar quote sort of captures for me how just that hair on fire attitude he had when talking about music. I was just reading an article today about like the jazz scene and how nowadays, jazz is such an institution that a lot of the young people think jazz, they think of like PBS, it's like Ken Burns, like that's like old people's music, or it's like kind of like a type of classical music now. And they were saying, no, man, that was countercultural. These guys were all heroin addicts, and
they were getting like stabbed like after concerts and stuff. Like,
yeah,
absolutely, yeah. Like Lee Morgan got axed because some jealous. I think it was his ex. I think it was his wife took him out.
Yeah,
but he didn't
for
live
sure.
to
And it's
see
the same.
30.
Travel back a couple of centuries further, and that Catholic penitential in me. I listened to Father Ripperger's lectures on music, but he was just talking about how, classical music is just, it epitomizes an ordered life and, the pursuit of virtue. And I'm like, bro, have you read any like composer biographies? Like, these people were, engaging with prostitutes, had gambling problems, had drinking problems, were nominally Catholic, but also totally Freemasons. And they were pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable in polite society. But, we have a couple hundred years, we've gone a couple hundred years past, so we can look back with rose-colored glasses, and we've sort of sanitized the history. And we've, what was avant-garde back then is now, it's now old-fashioned, and we've pushed beyond that. And specifically speaking about Western music, just the idea of consonance versus dissonance is entirely subjective, because, back then it's like, unisons and fifths were acceptable, and at some points major and minor thirds became acceptable, and then seventh chords were used as a point to create tension and shift key, and now jazz just uses them as coloristic devices where they're no longer treated as dissonances. So it's like the boundary of what is acceptable, what is consonant and dissonant, has been evolving with us, much in the same way that we don't really speak with Shakespearean vernacular anymore. It's just, I don't think Shakespeare would understand, like, bet or riz or cringe and all of this stuff.
Well, now I got to confess, I don't understand half of those things you just
Me
said.
neither.
So.
My bad. I got a little bit into my music Thomist hat,
I think I caught cringe.
There you go.
Oh, that the Gen Z speak, yeah.
And Anton, I
Mhm.
if you don't mind, could we hang out here for a minute? Because
Absolutely.
one thing that I know that I wanted to talk about today, I think we all want to talk
Mhm.
about this. We haven't gotten there yet, and I'm looking at the
Mhm.
time thinking, "Ooh, we should get there soon."
Yeah.
Is so you mentioned so in music there is consonance and dissonance.
Mhm.
But the title of today's stream is not which the kind of liturgical music is more consonant, traditional or modern. It's
Mhm.
not which one is more dissonant, traditional or modern. It's which one is better. So my question for you, and obviously I'm teeing this
Yeah.
up, but
Yeah.
is it as simple as more consonant is more better, or maybe it's more dissonant is more better? Is there such a thing as better when it comes to music? And if there isn't, then why does there seem to be some kind of movement, the Father Rippergers of the world,
Mhm.
who do insist that there is something that's objectively better about classical music as compared to modern counterparts? And does this at all fit into the kind of picture that somebody like Bishop Barron might paint, where they talk about like objective beauty?
Mhm.
I wouldn't mind kind of
Yeah.
dwelling here for
I think
a
that's
minute.
a really interesting, like,
Well,
I'm such a nerd. I love that, those kinds of discussions about music.
well,
So yeah.
let me just add to that question
Mhm.
that when we say or classical music, that already we're compressing
Yes.
Hundreds
so
of years.
many
Yeah.
different genres, subgenres
Mhm.
within classical music. So, are we talking about Renaissance music? Are we talking
Mhm.
about Baroque music? Are we talking about the Romantic music?
Mhm.
And are we talking about modern music? Are we talking Stravinsky, or
Yeah.
are we talking Pachelbel here?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. Yeah.
and are those equally scandalous among themselves?
Mhm.
Um,
That's a really good question, and it's loaded. I think, just to quickly define our terms of what constitutes what would generally be lumped into classical music, I think a couple of the most important trends within Western classical music are: one, it's written down. I think there's a very specific notational system that was used to preserve this music, so that's one important thing. And the other thing, specifically with Western music, is it boils down to harmony. Chords built on thirds, and a specific sequencing of those chords to build tension and release tension, to play with expectation. Really, that's the sort of underlying kind of mechanism on which this music is built. And then, of course, things like binary form, ternary form, sonata form, and all of that stuff, all of these sort of templates that we sort of write all of this stuff on, broadly speaking. Now, there's obviously more, but in a hyper simplistic way, those are really the characteristic elements of Western classical music. And it spans many different countries, many different styles, but you can kind of boil it down that there is a certain to borrow our Thomistic language, there's a certain kind of harmonic teleology that's involved, and a lot of the excitement is, are you going along with the tendencies of those harmonies? Are you frustrating the teloi to create drama? But you eventually, do reach the telos. It's just that it doesn't always have to, or sometimes you don't, and sometimes that's its own kind of drama artistically.
Do you think I could maybe start with a question that I'm going to ask for the audience's sake?
Sure.
What is, earlier we were talking about consonance and dissonance. What is consonance? What is dissonance?
Very good.
Just want to make sure that the audience can kind of keep up. You know what I mean?
So I'll give you a very sort of everyday explanation and something that's more theoretical.
You should be sitting at your piano.
Oh, I guess
I was actually just going to ask.
Are you at your piano?
I could. I'm there. Let me
Yes. Of course. Oh, come on.
Let me.
This is quality.
All right. Let's see if I can. Yeah. I should probably scooch it here just closer to my audio interface so I don't.
And by the way, everyone, you should all follow Anton's socials with his really amazing piano work.
Oh, thanks for the plug, Daniel. Yeah, I am especially in a post-COVID world, I'm super interested in exploring the intersection of technology and music. I love traditional music lessons, but doing stuff online, really fun stuff. Can you hear that?
Oh, I can hear it. Sounds good.
Stuff.
That sounds great.
Cool. Awesome. Wow. All right,
on eagle's wings.
Oh man, I don't have that memorized. I'm
just messing with
you. No worries. But very broadly speaking, we could say consonance is the when tones seem to work well together, and then when they don't seem to work well together, they're dissonances. So I think thirds are probably the most. Thirds are probably the most cliched consonants. We all tend to hear that as harmonious. But if you're talking about minor seconds, you're starting to hear a little bit of tension, and we don't really need to get too much into theory. but your ear kind of hears that as those two aren't really matching. Now you could flip a minor second around into a major seventh, and that still sounds really it's jarring to the ears. Kind of grating. Now the interesting thing about that is that sounds really harsh, but what if we fill it in with more thirds? That kind of softens things up, right? Now we don't hear that as much anymore. I've just filled it in. So different combinations will create, varying levels of harshness or softness, very broadly speaking. Maybe those are synonyms with consonance and dissonance. Now to go more into theory, I'm just going to blow past this, and maybe this is something we can follow. And it boils down to physics. It boils down to the overtone series. Like when you hear a fundamental tone, I'm just going to play C. I don't think the digital piano can quite reproduce this. It really works on an acoustic stringed instrument. Or strung instrument. Can't quite English right now, but yeah. when you hit a bass note, implicit in that, and you can kind of hear it. I think with guitars, with violins, anything with strings that freely vibrate, in that tone, you should have all the notes in a major chord show up, and at some point, I think B flat and F sharp show up. It's been a while since
does your piano reproduce sympathetic vibrations?
I don't think so. I could try. Let me see.
I used to have a bulb when it did.
I don't think it does. Because usually how it is in a piano is an acoustic piano is you silently hold down one note so it releases the string. The damper is no longer clamping down, so the string is free to vibrate. And then you pound on the bass, and then it forces that string to vibrate even though you haven't hit it with a hammer. And that's one way you can find the sympathetic vibrations. Yeah. But that's a wonderful phrase. Yeah, consonants, very broadly speaking, you could say they vibrate sympathetically with the other notes.
Yeah.
And a lot of the first thing that shows up in the harmonic series is the fifth, which also makes sense if you think some of our earliest music was a bunch of parallel fifths, and early chant was fifths, because that's the first sympathetic vibration you could say we were sensitive to as a culture. And at some point, our ears became attuned to the major third, just compress that, you have a major triad. And further along in the harmonic series, you'll come across a B flat, speaking specifically in the context of C major. And all of a sudden, the seventh chord, we're picking that up as related to the fundamental, and that becomes a consonance. So a lot of it is sort of like how sensitive are we to those sympathetic vibrations, and how willing are we to accept those other sympathetic vibrations as still being related to the fundamental note, which is bass C in this context. So yeah, that's very broadly speaking, that's my little TED talk on consonance and dissonance.
Vibrating, and you see that you really see it like on a guitar string, like guitar players. We do this thing called harmonics, where the loudest harmonic, Kevin can demonstrate this, is you play that 12, you play the fundamental like open E string, and then
I don't know if this is gonna work because it's an acoustic, but let's see let's see if I can turn my microphone.
So do the so like the 12th fret harmonic is just the octave.
So the string sounds like this, and hopefully you can hear this. I didn't prepare this at all, but that's what the string sounds like.
That's the fundamental.
And then if you hover your finger over the 12th fret and you can kind of hear it, you know?
And so you can go like, and that's like the strongest harmonic. So that, but the point is when you hit that harmonic that you play in the 12th, it's already in the fundamental. You just don't know it. It's there, that fundamental, all of those harmonics are ringing. So when you go up and down that string, you're getting the fundamental, you're getting the octave, then you're getting the fifth, then you're getting the octave of the octave, then you get the third, and then that seventh, and then there's like you know, if you go up, you can actually play Pretty Woman just with harmonics on a single string, you know.
Actually, I wouldn't know how to do that. Pretty Woman. I actually don't know how to play Pretty Woman.
You know, okay. So one of my old references.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure it out if I sat here, but
hard to do it on the spot when you're hosting a stream, right?
Yeah.
So now that we know a little bit about consonance and dissonance, Anton, which one is better?
The thing is, there is really no objective answer, but Western music has really structured itself in such a way that all music wants to arrive at a consonance, and building dissonance is really sort of your way of creating drama and your way of sort of taking you away from home. I remember one of my theory teachers really liked using Homeric epics as an analogy for sonata form. It's like you're Odysseus on your journey, and the more dissonance and the more distant keys you're introducing into the work, you're taking the listener far away from home. But the whole punchline is you want to bring that listener home after a long journey. And so dissonance is just a function of creating drama, because if you're just playing consonances, you're at least for Western ears, you're going to stagnate. Now, there are ways that you could alleviate that sense of stagnation, and you're probably going to have to work in more rhythmic nuance. Yeah. So you'd have to play with different parameters. But if we're talking specifically about pitch, consonance and dissonance just serve different functions. I think we're attuned to feel consonance as home, and dissonance is far away from home and dramatic tension. And then when you get into jazz, dissonance is about color. And I guess intentional instability, so that consonance is given meaning in with the context of that instability.
Yeah, but don't you think like every culture though tends to have their own version of arriving at the consonants?
Oh, like, for sure. Yeah.
There's like I mean, you think of the ubiquity of the pentatonic scale. So you look at all the cultures that have their version of a pentatonic scale, which is that harmonic series essentially.
Yeah, exactly. Because aside from the fundamental, the sympathetic vibration we most detect is the fifth. And so we just put a bunch of fifths together, you compress them within the range of an octave, and you get some version of a pentatonic scale.
And then if you build a fifth off of a fifth, and you keep doing that, eventually you're going to build a scale, and you can like derive a whole pentatonic thing. And but so really there's this, it's almost like a naturalistic phenomenon of it's not just purely like music, Like we think of just music as being a thing, but it really goes deeper than that, back to just like the physicality of the vibrations.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then we we've just assigned meaning to it in specific cultural context. But in terms of just getting the raw materials, it is very primal. It is just something physical, reacting to the harmonic series and these vibrations, and picking up on these sympathetic vibrations and codifying them in a way that we can use it as a language. And something to create atmosphere. But yeah, it is like this interesting intersection of natural phenomenon, but also the human instinct to want to create something in our image, or to create something to express the inexpressible, especially speaking about music that doesn't have text, so you can't really assign anything literal to it, but it is more about something feeling, some feeling, something spiritual or ecstatic.
Oh, when you say that about text, I have a very distinct memory of the first time I had the revelation that a piece of instrumental music could have a poetic meaning. It was a Paul Winter consort had a piece. He was kind of a new age jazz guy back in the 70s and 80s, and I vividly remember the moment I heard this, and I had this light bulb moment, because they announced this piece of music. The whoever it was, the VJ or DJ, announced the music as saying, "This is a song about," like, it was, and I don't remember what it was actually about, but it was something like about world peace, harmony, ecology, and it was Paul Winter's Song for the Whole Earth or something. And then, so he gave this whole, like, explain the meaning of what the song was about. And then he played it, and it was like this instrumental piece of music. But there was like nonverbal chant, and it was just, you could, but I palpably felt the whole meaning that Paul was pouring into the song when he wrote it. And I was like, oh yeah, that's all in there.
Mm-hmm.
That is totally in there. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that so we just talked about consonance and dissonance, and how it seems like it's kind of returning to a consonant interval is kind of baked into the physics of what music is. So if we're trying to answer this question about which kind of liturgical music is better, modern or traditional, well, it's easy, right? We should just take a look at, kind of the most popular traditional songs, the most popular modern songs. Which one has more dissonance? That one is worse. And then the one that has more consonance is better, right? Problem solved. Music is objective after all, right?
Yeah.
Well, I have a story about dissonant music in church. Every year we used to do a community Stations of the Cross, and we had this very wonderful classically trained organist at our parish, and he was actually a doctor of music. And so he would always play the organ and do a very classical version of "Were You There?" When they crucified my Lord. It's kind of a traditional spiritual, but and played on the pipe organ. He plays it like a classical virtuoso. And so with each progressive verse, he would start doing those outside variation.
That's really cool.
Chords, which with his organ is just, it's like classic for that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one year, by the time he got to the last verse, he was going so far outside that I just remember all the people in the back of the church that were right under the organ loft. Everyone was like turning and looking back, like he just like lost everybody. He was getting so, and I was digging it. I was like, oh, that is so cool. But people just lost their place in the song, because that's kind of the organist game, where they sort of introduce the theme, and then the people start singing, powerful. And once the people start carrying the song on their own, then the organist can start throwing in all those variation passages and go a little bit outside. But he just went a little too outside. So that was once upon a time when dissonance sort of collapsed the piece. It was just a little too dissonant for everybody. But that's one of my all-time favorite musical experiences. I was just cracking up. It's just like, because I was loving it, and then he went a little too far for everyone around me, and they were like scowling at him.
I'm with pick and choose, where that's where I would get interested.
Yeah, I think same. I think that is an area where music is such a communal experience. It never really is, a performer just talking at or performing at an audience. There is that interactivity, and I think from the point of view of a performer, it's like, you're sort of balancing how much do you want to hold your audience's hand, but also how much do you want to lead them into something new and interesting, and it might be that balance, and that pacing might be different depending on where you are on a given day in a given congregation.
And can I ask you,
Yeah.
Anton, to play two different chords for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
So could you play for me, and I don't care what if you want to play for me a major seventh.
Okay.
You
Just
play
the
C.
seven, just the interval or the chord? Sorry,
You
the
play
chord, right?
play like a C major seventh. Yeah.
Okay.
Chord.
So okay, yeah.
Okay. So, dear audience, I want you to listen to that chord, and I want you to think to yourself, does that sound mostly consonant? Are you hearing a couple dissonances in there? You might be, and that's great. And Anton, would you now play for me like a major 9, I guess? So just like, play a C chord with the second on top, but an octave up.
Maybe leave the ninth and leave the seventh out.
Yeah. So there's another chord. Both of those chords are going to be 4 notes. And those are either going to be so it's going to be the root, the third, the fifth, and the seventh, or the root, the third, the fifth, and the ninth, which is really just the second and octave up. I hope that you listened to both of those chords, dear audience, and maybe you thought to yourself that you preferred one over the other. But was one better than the other? To me, I think it's pretty obvious that the answer is no. There's neither chord is better than the other. Maybe they're used in different contexts. Maybe they're used in different circumstances. Maybe that major seventh chord, maybe it sounded like it really wanted to resolve somewhere. And maybe that ninth chord sounded like it kind of could have almost been the beginning of a progression almost. But I don't think there's a hard and fast answer to which one was better, right? I think it's dependent on the circumstances.
Yeah. And in some cases, it is analogous to taste, like trying different cuisine and seeing what flavor works for a specific meal. What ingredient works for a specific musical moment you're wanting to create or experience.
But I think it's also about what you're expecting.
Expectation's a big thing for sure.
Like if you throw that major seventh chord in the wrong context, it's going to ruin it. But when you use it in the right context, it's just like the skies open and the rays of sunbeam down.
Listen to this chord.
Yes.
So this might sound kind of nasty if I go like this.
Yep.
Hopefully you can hear that, and you can hopefully hear the dissonances in there, and it kind of sounds weird, right? But what if I kind of played it in like a little bit of like a Spanish context? Like what if I did something like this, where it was kind of like, the like all of a sudden you
tension.
At first you hear that, you're like, where are we going? Like that, we're not done, right? But then you hear it in context, and it tells a little bit of a story. And I just think that it's important to keep that in mind when we're talking about what music is better, because I think it's kind of a nonsensical question.
So there's another aspect to this, though. If we bring this back to liturgical music, that the purpose of the music in liturgy is to accompany a text. It's so that we sing words. Okay. So one of the things, another thing that Sacrosanctum Concilium was concerned with was that the music that we do in church is singable. And this goes back to that whole polyphony controversy prior to Trent, where they say that Trent actually saved polyphony because the polyphonic, when polyphony came along, and then they kept getting more and more polyphonic to where it was so polyphonic that you couldn't tell who was singing what. And they were just about ready to toss it out out the door and ban it. And then Trent came along and said, oh, no, we can have polyphony, but you have to do it in such a way that the words are still intelligible. So so I think in a liturgical context, the music in a way does want to serve the words, and Sacrosanct Concilium was very concerned that the people can sing along, and they were actually and they actually started to encourage with in Vatican II that they do want everybody to participate, everybody to be singing these words. So when we ask this question about liturgical music, I think one of the answers is what they addressed there, that primarily it needs to be conducive to people singing along. And I think we could even tie this together to secular liturgical music, because we have liturgical music, quote unquote, football games, right? I mean, we have songs that you want to hear, or at the baseball game. Now, I'm not
or
a
like
big
anthems,
sports.
like the anthems of countries. I think
The
kind of
national anthems.
Yeah.
So there are places where we want to hear, or political events. Think of the way, not to get political, but let's just, being politically agnostic, think of the way that Donald Trump famously has adopted, the song by Lee Greenwood, "God Bless the USA." It's almost become a liturgical song for him, every time he comes out in his rally, or even Kamala Harris with maybe the Taylor Swift or Rihanna songs, the ones that have become her theme songs when she comes out. And that also, I think, in a way, is liturgy. But I guess the point is these are songs that have a broad appeal. You pick a song for your liturgy that it's like a song everybody knows, that it's going to be a sing-along song. Now, are you going to sing the baseball song? Are you going to want to listen to the baseball song on the radio? Maybe not. Are you always going to want to, sing the national anthem? Maybe not. But in the right context, you do want to sing. You want to sing the right song at the right moment. So I think that's the real challenge with what's appropriate liturgy. So then we get into, well, are more modern genres of music conducive to that? And I think they've proven that they are, when they're done. I think they have to be done with respect. I think it's better when they're done with a little bit of joy, reverence, certainly. But if they can set the stage where people can like sing along and get these earworms that they carry with them, I think functionally, any music that's done in a respectful, solemn is the word that Sacrosanctum Concilium uses, but any music that's done in that way can be very conducive. So I got to, and I'll just say that from my own personal experiences, from being a Catholic for 20 years, that I can't say that I've ever been to a mass where the music was not, that the music didn't function in that very way, and maybe I'm because I'm open to all music, that I allow it to function. I don't hear music like songs that come on and I don't say, oh, that's Peter, Paul, and Mary. That's nuns with 12-string guitars. I think, well, I like Peter, Paul, and Mary. I like Joan Baez. I like Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And I like those nuns strumming their 12 strings, I was just 2 weeks ago, I had the most profound experience because I sort of accidentally went to mass at not my time because I missed my. I'm a bad Catholic. I go to vigil mass. Okay, I'm a bad, so I'm right off. I'm a bad Catholic. I go to vigil mass, but I missed my vigil mass, so I had to go Sunday morning like a good Catholic. But I was blessed with the presence of the bishop. We have a wonderful bishop, very pro Vatican II bishop, but not overly radical, but just a straight down the middle guy. And he just gave this wonderful homily. It was the installation of our new priest, and I had just been thinking about this old song that really moved me from my childhood back in my Methodist days. It's a kind of a folk praise song, I should say folk worship song that was written in 1971, based on Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. Alleluia, alleluia. And I didn't really know that we sang that in the Catholic Church, but to close out this Mass, they break into seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And it just deeply moved me. But it was done with an organ and traditional singing, but it was a modern folk song written in 1971, and I was just incredibly moved. So
I want to piggyback off of what you said. So you said something like, I don't think I've ever been to a mass where like the music wasn't appropriate. And then you kind of qualified it by saying, I'm open to all music. Let me tell you this. When I was growing up trad, I generally attended around one non-trad mass per year. We would go on vacation up to the Catskill Mountains, and we would go to the local. Sometimes we would drive like an hour and change to go up to Albany, New York, to attend a traditional Latin mass in Albany. But if we didn't feel like doing that, we would just go to the local Catskills Novus Ordo mass, and they had Novus Ordo music, and I remember like telling myself that I didn't like the music. Why? Because I knew I wasn't supposed to like it, because I'm better than that music and I'm holier than that music.
Mhm.
And like I look back at that now and I'm like, that music was fine. Like, there was nothing wrong with it. And I listen to that kind of music today and I'm like I don't find it I find that my old reaction was totally unjustified, if that makes sense. And so I think that you were on to something, Daniel, when you said that like you can't go into it with like the elitist attitude, because I think if you do,
yeah, and I should also add to that some of my favorite music is music that I once hated.
There you go.
And so I kind of make a practice, like if I buy, and I'm old enough that I still buy albums, vinyl and CDs.
I still have CDs too. I love liner notes. I love having physical copies of things. Yeah, I love it too.
Me too.
I make this like practice. To me, it's like a ritual. If I buy just a real, lemon of a CD, I make a point. I always have to like give it time, go back to it. And some of my favorite albums are albums that my first experience was I hated it. And I think it very much has to do with it's not what I expected it to sound like. You buy a record, you put it on, and it's like, well, that's not what I bought this record for. I bought this record to sound this way. But sometimes you listen to it enough and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, no, I kind of like that. You find yourself singing along to something that gets stuck in your ear. And so I guess maybe that is bringing us, we're arriving at what the point that I was hoping that we would maybe make is that maybe my appeal is that if I can ask people to maybe have just try to humor us musicians with a little bit more of an open mind, and maybe try to just listen to music and say, what can I get out of that? And, you might be rewarded, and it might be a win-win, because rather than sitting through mass scowling and talking under your breath about what awful music they have at your parish, maybe you're missing out on something that's actually incredibly good. It's like the pearls before swine. I mean, how often, this is like taking somebody to a concert. Have you ever had this experience where you take somebody to a concert, just because you need a date or you need a buddy to go, and you drag somebody to a concert, and you get about 3 songs in, and you have this sinking feeling like they're not getting it. And then they're bringing you down. So my answer to that is I just don't take people to, I just, someone just come to town. I'm going to this show, and I'm not dragging somebody that doesn't like this band. I'm going and I'm digging it, and, so it's like, let's give it, let's give music a chance, and maybe, maybe have some charity towards the, the Antons at your parish that are serving you up this banquet of wonderful music. And if
Thanks, Daniel. I really got to hire you as a PR person, because I'm so bad at, like, I'm always awkward talking about myself in a musical.
Well, you need, you need to, I gotta say, you need to promote somehow. You need somebody to promote your stuff, because you need to have more people following you. You have, and I'm not just buttering you up, but your YouTube content is like perfect.
Thank you.
There's so much annoying social media content out there, because there's the people that the virtuosos that are just like show off, that gets annoying. People just showing off. And or there's the people like me who are just like posting hacky see what I could do.
No, but it's beautiful. It's music in the context of day-to-day life. I think we need more Daniels, because I think, especially speaking of classical music, it can be very ivory tower-esque. And I think it's very nice to see various types of music, from classical to jazz to your own creative stuff, but in the context of, like, music belongs to the people. It's not this protected, sacred. I mean, it can be, it has maybe elements of the sacred and elements of the transcendent, but it belongs to the people.
It's to lift up. All music is, all music needs to lift up, even if you're in a dark place, and you gravitate towards some dark music, it's still giving you that warm elixir.
Absolutely.
I need this dark music. And you look back at the Psalms. Okay, the Psalms were dark like that. I think we forget that the Psalms were the pop music of their day. And you look at the content of the Psalms, and we have some Psalms that we can't read in church because they're too graphic, too violent.
There's a medicinal quality to all of that catharsis. You can't turn a blind eye to your sadness, to your anger, and to your bitterness, just because we have to keep things clean for general audiences. Sometimes you really got to go into those deep, dark human places. There's absolutely a place for that.
There's a time and a place for 9 Inch Nails.
Heck yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
I came to the music really late. I think
at mass.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I'll be a good boy. I'll say not at mass.
Yeah. Although ambient. Okay, you know what? I'll even say ambient. That's a challenge. Hey, Trent Reznor, if you're out there listening to us, you need to do a gothic techno mass. That's the challenge. Got to do a mass.
Maybe.
Yes, you can collaborate with Marilyn Manson on that.
Well, that would be a trip.
Who grew up in my neighborhood, and I know people that hung out with
Marilyn Manson, really?
Yeah, he's like a year older than me, and I used to have a coworker that went to school with him, and then when I briefly played in my cousin's goth band.
Nice.
And we had one of the band members used to party with. That was back in the heyday of the Marilyn Manson. I have to confess, I was very scandalized by Marilyn Manson when he came out. It was just but he scandalized everybody. In all fairness,
maybe that was the point. That was the point.
That was the point.
No. It was like the Overton window phenomenon. None of us had the Overton window. He was so far outside of the Overton window. I mean, I knew people that were not religious that were scandalized by his early albums, and I was among them. But again, my good cousin roped me into playing in his goth band.
We all need that cousin.
We do.
It was like a 9 Inch Nails experience, and so,
you know what you said about some of your favorite music is music that you initially resisted. I think that I definitely feel the same way. I'll give you a funny story first and then a more serious one. But yeah, a very funny short story is I remember 10 years ago I kept hearing, last Christmas I gave you my heart, and I hated that song so much. It was just so annoying. It was so cheesy. And then a few years later it snuck up on me and I'm like, dang, I actually really like this.
I had that same song, same experience, and now that is one of my classic That's one of my classics.
I love it so much. Yeah,
I love it so much. Yes,
I just love it so much. Yeah, and
there's lots of cheesy Christmas music.
I just hated it. It was just so
okay. So you know what? And you know what? Isn't this exactly parallel to our subject matter here? Because the same thing is true with Christmas music. Mm-hmm. Christmas music is the perfect analog to this because we think of what is proper Christmas music. Mm-hmm. It's joy to the world, all the way, all the good Christmas songs, the classics. And then we have these modern, quote unquote, cheesy pop Christmas songs. Mm-hmm. And we say, oh, that's cheesy. Exact reaction you had, exact reaction I had. Mm-hmm. But you know what? It finds its way into the canon, mm-hmm. And now it's an old enough song that it's part of proper Christmas music. Now, I will tell you the last one that is still working its way onto my canon, not quite yet, but Dean Martin, Marshmallow Christmas, still working on it.
Maybe it'll arrive. It'll make it to the canon.
I feel like it's getting there. But and John Lennon's Happy Christmas, that's one of my that's like in my canon now.
Is that the one with Yoko on it?
No. This is how does Happy Christmas go? And so this is Christmas.
I love that song.
Oh, great tune. Yeah. But I do know I have heard people groan at that. And I don't know why, just because it's like a Christmas people. And again, I have the same beef over the liturgy wars as I do over Christmas music. I personally love Christmas music because it's like the music that I like. It's like I feel like I have this. I often say that at Christmas everyone's Catholic because it's just all about the Virgin Mary and the birth of Jesus. And it's like when I go to a Protestant Christmas service, it's like, sounds very Catholic to me. And I kind of have the same feeling like with jazz and Christmas music. Like Santa Claus is coming to town. Sounds a lot like Gertrude's Bounce. You read the first measure of Gertrude's Bounce, and you're like, wait, is that Santa Claus is coming to town? No, it's just jazz. So I love Christmas for the music, and which I used to, and I went through in my fundamentalist days, I didn't celebrate Christmas. So I had this antagonism to Christmas, like a Jehovah's Witness type attitude, like it was a total pagan thing. And so I used to really hate Christmas music. And then I had
fell in love,
epiphany, fell in love. And now I love like all Christmas music, even Marshmallow Christmas. Mm-hmm. And
Yeah.
what's the biggest Christmas seller of all time, though? Uh, the pop, who's the woman that sings the song? Oh, all I want for Christmas is you.
Mariah Carey.
Yeah.
Mariah Carey.
The Mariah Carey. Yeah. I even have welcomed that into the canon now. So
I'm not gonna lie. I love that Mariah Carey
Yeah,
tune.
it's a good one.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So I've got that Pope Francis, totus, totus, totus.
Mhm.
Everyone, everything, everything. You know, all are
I think
welcome.
life is
More,
honestly,
the
life is so much more beautiful when you're open to new things. I think that you it's like you discover a new flower, a new tree, a new way at looking at the sky. It's so much more joy if you open up just a little bit. It doesn't mean you're not losing anything. You're just gaining stuff.
Right.
You're not surrendering that your favorite genre is somehow now inferior. No, you have more at the buffet.
I am considerably happier now
Mhm.
that I am way less elitist than I was when I was a trad. When I was a trad, I prided myself on hating like lots of contemporary stuff, and it made me miserable. So
now here, you know what the twist on this? And this is the moral of the story, though, because this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you two, because I feel like the three of us, we are the ones who, I'm going to say, deserve to be elitist. Certainly Anton. Among the three of us, Anton deserves to be a true elitist. Now, I feel like I can be an elitist just because of all the music that I deeply love and play and experience on an incredibly deep way and understand. I understand it theoretically. You know, I understand why it's good, and I know that it is what we would say is, it is objectively good. Like well performed with great skill, everything that we objectively, what the critics would call good. I understand that kind of good music. So I feel like when we talk about elitist, that the three of us, if anyone has a right to be elitist and criticize music, it's people like us who are actually musicians, have actually played music, studied music, performed music, deeply know music, and so we're the guys preaching the message that it's not about being elitist. So all you normies out there that are being elitist about On Eagle's Wings, that, hey, it's a great tune.
Just have some fun. I think when I look back at my own musical journey, I feel like I got educated out of my own elitism, because I definitely had, like,
same.
let's say my late teens, early 20s, I definitely had a tendency towards, like, all this Western classical music written in the 19th century is just peak humanity right here. But yeah, I think I was blessed with really sympathetic and open-minded teachers, and then you learn much more about how music around the world is created and the various human experiences and political and historical context that goes with it, and you just kind of develop an appreciation for how music is created and recreated, and yeah, now you just have so much to pick from. Even speaking more like as a classical musician, looking for the definitive interpretation of Chopin or Beethoven and stuff. I had a phase where I needed to look for the ultimate interpretation of whatever I was learning. But now, like, more than 10 years past that phase, now it's more like I almost play this game with myself every time I'm learning a new music. I want to minimum, I pick 2 or 3 of my favorite contrasting interpretations, and I'm excited every time I hear someone play something I'm learning and they force me to listen to it in a different way, or they force me to sort of squirm in my chair.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean I shed my own opinions, but it's more like I can appreciate my own opinions in the context of a larger conversation about this music that we keep discovering and rediscovering. And it makes me excited that that it speaks to the richness of this music, that someone can have a completely different perspective, and then I have the luxury of sitting back and hearing someone play something completely differently, and it's like it's like the same piece is reborn 2 or 3 times.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that pretty well. That pretty well says the point there.
I don't know about you guys. I think that's a pretty good point to end on. Oh, although Anton, you were going to tell us a second story, and I think we cut you off.
That was it. That was the whole thing about searching for the
Good.
definitive interpretation, and now opening. Yeah, that was it. So it kind of just joined very smoothly to what Daniel was saying. I do have one thing I want to add before we close it out, and it's something that Daniel said that's really important about like the not just the quality of the music, but the quality of the performance. So a couple things. Is that technically I will say the Gregorian chant is probably friendlier for audience participation, which is ironic because you said you grew up, Kevin, you grew up where the congregation wasn't really encouraged to sing or not expected to sing.
Like not only not encouraged, but you would get dirty looks if you tried to sing along.
Yeah. But it's like on a technical level, because everything is written stepwise and the syllables line up with the text. It actually feels much
you mean
more
like
natural.
like steps away?
Yeah.
No, none of those interval jumps.
Yeah, exactly. So nothing
like
operatic or nothing
over the rainbow.
Exactly. You don't need to be an opera singer. So in a funny way, it's like that older music lends itself better. And even in some cases when they're unmeasured, but they mimic the patterns of speech so well that it's more intuitive in some ways. And Novus Ordo music, despite it being, I don't know, basic or too poppy, it's actually, because it borrows a lot of rhythmic content from jazz and pop, it's actually harder to execute. And sometimes some of those syncopations are really difficult if you don't have adequate.
Well, you got to know the song, just because if you technically write the rhythms out, you get a lot of those dotted 8/16 things, and people are like, but it's a feel, because if you know the song, if you're from that generation, you don't, and that's why they don't give you sheet music with a lot of the contemporary songs. It's just words on a screen. Well, at a Protestant church, it's just you don't have hymnals anymore with. And I had that experience when I was playing CCM at one of the little churches I went to. The older folks were like, "Well, where's the music?" Because they used to read like hymnal music, and they learned to sight read, because years ago people used to know a little bit about just, because families used to get together and sing songs together, and like Balthazar sight reading the four-handed Mahler piece with his Renaissance hero that he these people used to we have devolved. So when you say about the epitome of music being the great, I'm sort of with you, and I just wanted to let everyone know, though, that as much as I'm championing the an openness to contemporary music, I do personally I very much love, I'm a huge lover of classical music, and I love, organ masses and choir masses. And I can only envy Balthazar's years in Vienna when they had orchestral masses, which I guess they still do in Vienna. It's a thing. So if I ever fulfill my dream of traveling to Europe and doing my big European vacation, maybe I'll get to take in a orchestral mass, or maybe I'll just YouTube it. But I love classical music, so I'm all for. I think in my perfect world, which is oddly enough, it's like, I come on here to solve all the world's problems, and really they're already solved, because really my experience in being 20 years as a Catholic, the general pattern, I would say, if I had to break it down, I would say organ masses are still the norm, which is in harmony with Sacrosanctum Concilium. They said the pipe organ ought to have pride of place. recorder on song. Hi, let's not be dumping on. Hey, you want me to get my? I have a recorder I can pull out here and play you. Mary
Kevin,
Had a
you really
Little
need to have like a
Lamb.
live stream concert, man. We'll just start riffing on each other.
Recorders only, though. Live stream recorders only.
Yeah, live stream recorders. I'll learn.
Hey, now isn't there? Now wait. Now, didn't John Paul Jones? Now wait, God, didn't John Paul Jones play recorder on Stairway to Heaven? Now, come on.
Is it a recorder? Is it actually?
Well, you should Wikipedia it real quick if you can.
Let me do that.
I thought it was a recorder. And also my favorite band. I use that as a song people know, but my favorite band, Yes, from the 70s. They had a classic song called "I've Seen All Good People" that started out with acoustic guitar and recorder. I think it's a recorder.
And I looked it up. It is a recorder in Stairway to Heaven. I always figured it
So-
was some kind of.
so
it was like
all
a flute
you-
of some sort.
Yeah. So look, a good anything played well. I mean, to me, who can argue? Come on, can you argue a Stairway to Heaven?
Yeah,
I
I mean,
mean-
you're right. Anything played well.
Yeah, and Pick and Choose wasn't even joking. And hey, I laughed.
Oh, that wasn't ironic. He would love it. Yes. Well, I agree. Yeah, I love it. I'm with you.
It's my fault. It's my fault for laughing because I assumed, when I think of a recorder, I think of little kids picking up and playing. You know what I mean?
School. Yeah. Did you guys have to learn recorder in your?
I never did. No, I never. I went straight to piano. So
We
Well, when
didn't
I
have
was-
instruments at my little.
Oh, you went to a weird. Yeah, you went to your
yeah,
cult
we didn't have
school.
it.
Your little-
Yeah.
Now, when I was going to grade school in the 70s, we had actual music class. This is
I'm
in
jealous.
probably, I think we had it every year. I think we always had. I think every first, second, third, fourth, fifth. I think we always just had one of our classes was music class. And when we were probably in the fourth or fifth grade, we all got, the school issued us all recorders because they were like $5 a piece, these little plastic recorders. And we all, the whole class, the entire class learned to sight read music. And in music class, we all 20 whatever of us would play songs on the recorder. We played John Denver songs, Annie's song, 500, I've been gone 500 miles, all these old folk songs, which were not old when I was in school in the 70s. These were pop songs. So yeah, so I have a recorder. You're lucky I don't have it. I actually technically don't have it with me because it's stashed away in my at a place where I can practice it and not bother people. But yeah, recorder music. But so yeah, it's all. I'm saying it's all good. But the breakdown of the mass schedules ever since I've been going, been Catholic for 20 years is I'd say pipe organ is most common. Then we occasionally have piano, which we have some really skillful pianists that I just love. And then there's usually in the more larger parishes, there's usually one, what they call the life teen mass. And those are always those are done exquisitely, but it's usually you get one, if you like a life teen mass, you have to look for it, and there's one for you to go to, but they've always been respectful. So anyway, I guess I see my phone just hit 5%, so I'm gonna die here, and it's probably.
Do you want to give us any kind of parting words, Daniel?
I think I just did. I mean, let's be open to good music, be open-minded, keep, let the music be respectful. I think all music is, and have a little charity. I know it's corny. Like I said, the first time I saw the habited nuns strumming 12-string guitars and singing Joan Baez sounding songs, I kind of had a gut chuckle reaction. And then I said, you know what? Those old sisters, love that music. And I like that music too. I just it just hit. It's like what you're not expecting. I wasn't expecting to walk into mass and have sisters strumming 12-string guitars and singing, Joan Baez sounding songs. And but when I reorient my perspective and say, wait a minute, I like Bob Dylan. I like Joni Mitchell. I like that old stuff. Why, the music that uplifts me the most, actually, some of the music that, like a good Joni Mitchell album. I mean, there's no more sublime experience for me than a good Joni Mitchell record. And if we got nuns strumming guitars, singing folky songs, I mean, hey, I'm there for it. So maybe just like check yourself, take a step back, say, is this conducive to singing these words? I mean, I learned Dona Nobis Pacem from the pop version of it. That's why I know Dona Nobis Pacem, because our Life Teen band, that's the first time I heard that sung at mass. So one of the first Latin phrases I learned was from our Life Teen band. So and I thought it was reverently done. So yeah, it's all music is good music. Duke Ellington or some you know uh fictitious jazz character in the past said, there's only two good, only two kinds of music: good music, bad music. And I think there's only two kinds of music you're in the mood for, and music you're not in the mood for. And so
Yeah.
but
music that speaks to you is good music. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I do want to sneak in a very quick PSA to all the people that do administrative work for parishes is please do have a music budget. At least in California, my experience is Catholic churches were notoriously bad at budgeting for music, whereas Protestants, they value their music ministry so much. And I just feel like if you're not investing in like a music director, choir director, and a regular instrumentalist, like usually an organist for my church, you're going to be stuck with volunteers.
Kevin, can you take me off the screen for 1 second? Do you have that ability to black me out? Because I'm going to walk to a chart.
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. But yeah, I was just gonna say that invest in your music ministers, because it really does pay, because it's really tough for volunteer musicians, in the context of their day-to-day life. They don't have as much time to really devote to music ministry. But if you can make that someone's livelihood, you're gonna augment the performances of whatever genre, whether it's Gregorian chant or something more of a Novus Ordo flavor. So Catholic administrators definitely have a generous music budget, because it's tough to be a starving musician and still deliver something that serves your community and serves the gospel message.
That's awesome. Daniel and Anton, thank you so much for joining me today. I loved this stream. I don't get to talk about music often. So these past 2 hours and 20 minutes of just chatting music with you guys has been awesome. A much needed change of pace on my channel too, I think. And hopefully we were successful in inspiring people to be at least just a little bit more open-minded when it comes to music. That's what I hope we accomplished.
Yeah, for sure. Don't make it the last time, Kevin. It would be really neat to do something like this sometime at a later date.
I agree. My only regret is we didn't talk more about Steve Vai.
Hey, that's got to be part 2.
Yeah, we can do an entire stream on Steve Vai. Let's do that.
Have your audio interface ready, Kevin, because you're going to be the featured instrumentalist next time.
Okay, all right.
Actually, you know what?
Virtual amps and all that.
You know what? We should get really controversial. This new Pope Francis comment that he made about, like, to the Buddhists or the Muslims and the Buddhists when he did his world tour of Asia here in Oceania, and he made the comment about every religion is like this valid path to God or whatever, which I don't even get caught up in anymore, because I'm just like, finally we're implementing Nostra Aetate. Everybody, all the Vatican II, everybody that accepts Vatican II and holds it at a distance. It's like, yeah, Vatican II, this was good, but Nostra Aetate, they meant the right thing, but did they say it? I'm like, no, I'm totus. I'm all in for the Vatican II ride. And I think I think Nostra Aetate just brought us, to our next stage of our collective spiritual awakening. And I am all for interreligious dialogue, ecumenical dialogue. So maybe we can do a what was the Steve Vai album, Sex and Religion?
Yeah.
Hey,
the spirituality of Steve Vai. Start working.
I'll do my homework. I'll do my homework. I'll look up more Steve Vai.
That'd actually be like a really cool episode.
Yeah.
Like,
all right, man.
Would be.
You own the channel. You call the shots. Let us know.
I'm going to see him. I'm going to the Beat concert 4 weeks.
So cool. I'm so jealous.
So I'm looking forward to it. I've never seen Steve live, so
I've seen him twice so far. So you're in for a treat.
I almost went to see him on that last Joe Satriani tour, but I'm more a Vai fan than I didn't want to be shortchanged, you know.
I would love to see Satch as well. I haven't seen Satch yet. I would absolutely go to a G3 tour. I absolutely would. I just haven't yet. Not because I don't like Satch. I do. I like Steve Vai more, but it's on my bucket list.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. So, hey guys, that was super fun. And Kevin, got a big thanks for accommodating my my show idea. That was like a blast. I think
it's a great idea.
Yeah, thanks for having me join too. It was a really good panel, and thanks for indulging my music nerdiness. That was pretty cool to tinker.
Thank you for the music lesson. I felt like I was listening to Leonard Bernstein Norton lectures when you were giving us the overtone lesson there. So hey guys, all right, peace out to everyone. Keep rocking.
Thanks, team.
In the free world.
All right. We will see you all next time.